Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. In response to the announcement of the possible U.S. sanctions, Turkey says it will retaliate against any move to thwart its efforts to fight terrorism. U.S. President Donald Trump issued a new executive order authorizing the U.S. Treasury Department to draft significant new sanctions against Ankara. But Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin has expressed hope that the U.S. would not have to enforce the curbs on Turkey's economy. He said the prospective punitive measures could target any person associated with the Turkish government. Turkey says military operation would continue till a 30-kilometer border security zone is established. The death toll of the Kurdish and the ISIS militants from the Turkish operation in northern Syria has risen to 415. A statement issued by the Defense Ministry says the overnight land and air assaults were conducted successfully at the border. The ministry has confirmed the first death of a Turkish soldier since the launch of the Operation Peace Spring. It said the 14 villages have also been liberated from the terrorists in northern Syria. The ministry rejected claims that the Turkish army had targeted U.S. troops. Meanwhile, the UN said about 100,000 people have fled their homes following the operation. In a report, the bloc said many people are sheltering in schools or other buildings in Hasake city and the town of Tal Tamer. Turkey has launched Operation Peace Spring to secure its borders by eliminating militants and to ensure safe return of the Syrian refugees. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has expressed complete support to Turkey over the ongoing counter-terror operation in northern Syria. In a phone call with Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan, Prime Minister Imran Khan said Pakistan understands Ankara's concerns on terrorism. PM Khan said Islamabad hopes Ankara's efforts for enhanced security and peaceful resolution of Syrian situation are fully successful. He said after losing 70,000 lives due to terrorism, Pakistan is fully aware of the threats being faced by Turkey. The Prime Minister said Pakistan is looking forward to Erdogan's forthcoming visit to the country later this month. Meanwhile, a car bomb explosion has killed 3 civilians in Syria's northeastern Qamishli district. ISIS militants claim the responsibility for the attack. Kurdish forces said 9 others were wounded in the attack. They said ISIS militants have increased their activities in the region. The SDF said 5 ISIS militants broke out of a prison in Qamishli. Meanwhile, the UN says 100,000 people have left their homes in northeastern Syria. The US and China have struck an interim deal to defuse the year-long trade war which has threatened to derail a global economic growth. After 2 days of talks in Washington, Vice Premier Liu He agreed to double China's purchases of the US agricultural products. In return, President Donald Trump postponed the imposition of enhanced US tariffs on Chinese imports. More on the breakthrough in this report.
After 2 days of intense negotiations in Washington, US and Chinese trade representatives have put together a mini trade deal. US President Donald Trump had been pushing for an all-encompassing agreement, but he changed his mind after Chinese Vice Premier Liu agreed to make key concessions. China has agreed to sharply increase its purchases of American food and other agricultural products to between $40 to $50 billion a year. Beijing has also promised to open its financial services sector to wholly US-owned firms and address Washington's concerns about currency manipulation. Talking to reporters at the White House, Trump signaled a change of tone in US ties with China.
There was a lot of friction between the United States and China, and now it's a love fest. That's a good thing, but that's good for China and it's good for us, but it's good for the world.
Relations between the US and China have deteriorated significantly since trade talks broke down in May. The trade tensions also threatened to drag the global economy into recession. But the bonhomie between President Trump and Vice Premier Liu should reassure investors and governments around the world.
I think the relationship in certain ways may be better than it's ever been. We've been through a very tough negotiation. There's never been a negotiation like this. In all fairness, I give China tremendous credit. because for 25 or 30 years they've done very well with the U.S., and now we're doing something jointly.
President Trump says he hopes to sign the interim trade agreement with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping at the Asia-Pacific Economic Forum in Chile next month.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan will tomorrow travel between Tehran and Riyadh in a bid to defuse tensions in the Gulf. PM Khan last month agreed to undertake mediation efforts after being asked by Iran's President Hassan Rouhani and Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. For more on this story, we are joined by our Islamabad correspondent, Isa Naqvi. Thank you for your time, Isa. What can you tell us about Prime Minister's forthcoming visit to Tehran and Riyadh?
A welcome and a positive development, although there is not an official announcement of this trip, but the official sources at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Islamabad and also the Prime Minister's Secretariat have confirmed that Prime Minister Imran Khan will tomorrow leave for Tehran first, where he'll hold a meeting with President Hassan Rouhani, and later in the evening he'll fly to Riyadh, where he is expected to have a meeting with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And all of this is being done after he has had meetings with President Trump, Hassan Rouhani on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly session in New York. And before going there, he has had a meeting with MBS Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh. And apparently this schedule, which has not been announced yet, will be confirmed tomorrow when Prime Minister leaves for Tehran.
Okay, Isa, in the past, as we have seen, that Pakistan also tried to diffuse the tensions between both of these countries, but there was limited success. How optimistic do you think the government seems this time around after this Prime Minister's visit? Can it have a major breakthrough this time around?
I have spoken with the officials at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and in the government as well, and they are hopeful that this time around it is different from last 4 efforts. At least at 4 times in the past, Pakistan had tried to mediate between Iran and Saudi Arabia, but that could not make its headway because one of the parties actually did not want such a mediation between these 2 countries. But this time around, it seems, the officials say that this time around, it seems that both Iran and Saudi Arabia are in agreement that a role can be played by Pakistan, and that was evident after Prime Minister's visit to Riyadh last month, and later he went to attend the United Nations General Assembly session where he has had meetings with President Trump and Hassan Rouhani. And the fact that this visit has been lined up where he's going to go to Tehran first and then Riyadh, that means that Iran and Saudi Arabia have actually agreed that Pakistan can, and Prime Minister Imran Khan can play a mediator's role between these 2 countries. And the sources, they also claim that if there is a breakthrough or a positive outcome of the first 2 meetings, then after Riyadh, before coming to Islamabad, Prime Minister Imran Khan may may have a small stopover at Tehran on his way back, and can further continue with how to take or how to carry along with this mediation process.
Thank you very much. Our correspondent in Islamabad, Isa, updating us regarding the forthcoming and expected visit of Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan to Tehran and Riyadh in order to diffuse the tensions between the 2 countries. Now we move. The US have announced deployment of 3,000 more troops to strengthen Saudi Arabia's defense after last month's attack on its oil facilities. Pentagon says Washington will also send 2 Patriot batteries and terminal high-altitude area defense system to Saudi Arabia. Officials say the kingdom requested the additional forces as well.
In response to continued threats in the region, I've ordered the deployment to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia of 2 additional fighter squadrons and supporting personnel, along with additional Patriot and THAAD air and missile defense batteries. Taken together with other deployments I've extended or authorized within the last month, this involves about 3,000 United States forces.
The move represents the largest of the 3 rounds of the U.S. military deployments to Saudi Arabia since July. Moving on, 49 Palestinians have been wounded as Israeli forces fired live bullets and rubber-coated rounds along the Gaza border. Health Ministry said dozens of Palestinians sustained inhalation from tear gas fired by the Israeli forces. Israeli forces have killed 310 Palestinians and 18,000 others have been injured since the outbreak of the weekly protests in March 2018. The Great March of Return protests have called for lifting the Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip. Welcome back. The Modi administration has barred a Press Council of India's delegation from visiting occupied Kashmir. A 4-member fact-finding mission was scheduled to start a 5-day visit to the valley today. Citing security reasons, the government of Indian occupied Kashmir cancelled the Press Council's tour at the last moment. The Occupied States Information Department has asked the Press Council of India to postpone its delegation's visit till next month. By then, the state government would have relocated from a restive Srinagar to Jammu for the winter. This contrasts sharply with the Indian government's announcement on Thursday that occupied Kashmir is open for tourists despite the clampdown. India's curfew and communications blackout in occupied Kashmir has now entered its 69th day. India-imposed occupied Kashmir state government has burst its own claim of normalcy in the valley with a newspaper advertisement asking Kashmiris to resume their usual routines. In the ad, the government admits life in the valley is not normal, advocating for Article 370 revocation. Ad reads, the people of Kashmir have been misled over the special status. The view in the ad propagates people of the valley themselves have decided not to resume their normal lives. The propaganda piece has totally ignored the complete clampdown and communications blackout in the occupied territory. Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees have agreed to take a forward strategy for Afghan refugees repatriation. The agreement was reached at an informal session at Geneva on the sidelines of the 17th session of the Executive Committee of the High Commissioner's Program. In the meeting, quadripartite decides to remove shortcomings in Afghan refugees management and their voluntary return. It was also agreed to form a support platform with additional players expected to contribute for both the host and home countries. Session was attended by Pakistan's Minister for Narcotics Control, Shahryar Afridi, Iran's Interior Minister, Abdul Raza Fazli, as well as Afghan Refugees and Repatriation Minister Syed Hussain Alami Balkhi and UNHCR Regional Director. A Brexit deal is in sight after Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson backed down on the issue of border customs posts for Northern Ireland. EU officials say Johnson has indicated that he is prepared to make sufficient concessions to allow detailed talks to begin. After months of deadlock, the next 48 hours are expected to be crucial for Britain's exit from the European Union. Over this weekend, British negotiators will seek to seal a deal based on a revised draft submitted by Brexit Secretary Steve Barclay. The ice was broken during last-ditch talks on Thursday between British Prime Minister and Irish Leo Varadkar. European Council President Donald Tusk said there were good signs that a deal on Brexit can be reached. In the United States, 3 courts have blocked Trump administration's new immigration rule prohibiting U.S. visas to the low-income immigrants. Judge George Daniels of Southern District of New York has issued a nationwide ban on public charge rule, calling it repugnant to the American dream. The rule denies green cards and visas to low-income immigrants, believing them to be a burden on the government. Other district judges, Washington and California, have also issued similar injunctions. California has banned private prisons and immigration detention centers in the state. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump announced the resignation of acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan. Leaders of the indigenous protesters in Ecuador have refused to engage in a dialogue with President Lenín Moreno. In a statement, the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador said there will be no talks until the decree on cancelling fuel subsidies is recalled. The statement said that the dialogue offered by the government does not seem trustworthy. Moreno called on the protesters to negotiate with the government to cease violence and stabilize the political situation in the country. Demonstrators briefly burst through security lines to enter the National Assembly as anger grows over fuel tax and labor reforms. Moreno said the protests are not an outburst of social discontent, but an organized political move to break his government. Meanwhile, protesters have pledged to continue their demonstrations until Moreno steps down. In Japan, a man has been killed and 4 others injured after Typhoon Hagah hit Chiba Prefecture near Tokyo. The government has advised 1 million of residents to evacuate the area at the risk of floods and landslides. Japan's Met Agency says the heavy winds overturned a car, killing the man inside, and blew off the house roofs, injuring the residents. It said more than 16,000 households in Chiba and surroundings have lost electric power. The agency said the storm surges will continue in Pacific coast of Honshu, causing floods and landslides. Much of California has been on high alert since Friday as wind-driven wildfires tore through the state's south. The fire has claimed life, forced tens of thousands of people to evacuate, and destroyed multiple structures and homes. Details in this report.
A fierce wind-driven wildfire has swept foothills and canyons along the northern edge of Los Angeles. Authorities have said that the fires are being fueled by dry conditions and high winds known as Santa Ana winds. Several major highways, schools, and businesses have been shut down. There is growing panic as people flee from their homes.
I really felt frightened. I really felt scared because I'd never seen something like that. That was my first time to see real fire up close. I've been hearing about it, seeing on the TV, but this was my first time to be really involved in the fire.
At least 25 buildings have been destroyed by the blaze so far. Electricity has also been suspended as a safety precaution, and authorities say will only be restored after proper site inspections. Currently, some 200 firefighters, water-dropping helicopters, and firefighting airplanes are battling several blazes. People have been instructed to exercise caution.
If you stay in a mandated closed area, we will not assure your safety. That safety is, those areas are established to assure your safety. We need you to honor it.
A red flag warning, which indicates ripe conditions for wildfires, remains in effect through Saturday.
Lows and the highs of the business world now. In India, the government data has shown a decline of 1.1% in industrial output in the month of August. The manufacturing sector, which contributes over 77% to industrial sector, showed a drop of 1.2% in output. The manufacturing sector grew by 5.2% in the same month last year. The index of industrial production growth during April to August is 2.4%, down from 5.3% in the period last year. Earlier, the credit rating agency Moody's slashed its economic growth forecast for India for the second time in 3 months. Moody's Investor Services predicted India's GDP would expand by 5.8% in the ongoing fiscal year, down from its earlier forecast of 6.2%. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.